that if we are to get the full import of biblical wisdom, it's important that we understand the context of not only the author's time, but also our own context, and the interface of the two that can help us live our lives with greater wisdom and compassion. Today's gospel is certainly a good case in point. So if you'd bear with me for just a few moments, there are two aspects I think can help us to understand this passage better. First off, in the time of Christ, there were many different, shall we say, avenues or streams of discussion about the tradition of the Jewish faith. Today we might call them religious revolutions, if you will. One of the streams of thought and practice was the Pharisaic tradition. This was the tradition that felt that by going backwards to reclaim the laws of this faith and putting them into practice in very specific ways, that they would be more faithful to the greater tradition. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with. Secondly, many of these laws that they picked and created were very, very clear and specific and quite strict. For example, on the Sabbath, you had to wear a different pair of sandals. You could have no what we'd call metal in the sandal, because that means extra work. You could only walk a certain number of paces. Beyond that, it was considered work. Therefore, you were violating the Sabbath. Herein we have this particular scenario, where Jesus and his companions are walking through the fields of grain, and something very human happens. They're all hungry. So recognizing their hunger, they reach out to that which is right in front of them, these massive fields of grain, and begin to start popping these grains to satiate their hunger. And of course, the religious elite catch them at it and say, no, you're violating the Sabbath. Jesus points out that the law is meant to be subject to the practical reality of the human person. One more little insight. Notice Jesus was raised in the country, in a town called Nazareth, later on as an adult in Capernaum. He was not an urban dweller. The Pharisaical tradition came from the urban environment where it was much easier to live out these rules and regulations. Many of you have come from the country, or you have country members of your family. You know, country folk are very practical. Jesus is being practical here. He's saying, listen, they're hungry. Here's the food. Of course they're going to eat it. And we have a great tradition in David. So he kind of quiets him, but he pushes it one step further, which is where we get it in our own tradition. That is, he said, you know, what's really important, what's underlying all of these laws, is that God is much more interested not only in giving mercy, but us becoming people of mercy. It's not that sacrifices are bad, not at all. They must be put in the proper context. And so he plays with them and he says, you know, we have something greater here. He's referring to himself. Jesus embodies the mercy of God. He said, in effect, if you understand me and my mission, it's a mission of mercy, then you get it. But you don't, and that's why you don't get it. So I leave you with this thought. Again, Scripture scholars point out to us that it's important to notice the number of times, the number of ways and means that the authors of the Scriptures bring up certain themes, certain concepts, certain ideas that are meant to help us to live out a truly faith-filled, we call a religious tradition. Unfortunately, many of our fellow Catholics, including ordained members of our flock, misinterpret this and focus on the smaller things, the negation of the greater, more important things. So in today's gospel, we notice one of these, and that is judgmentalism. You know, Jesus spoke often against judgmentalism. He rarely spoke against sexual sins. Maybe it's we clerics are more interested in this type of stuff. I don't know. But it's interesting we find it so easy to judge other people. According to Bishop McElroy, do you know the number one reason why millennial Catholics stay away from the practice of faith? Judgmentalism, followed by hypocrisy. So perhaps, rather than focusing on the little things of the law, we might look at what Jesus is most interested in, and that is letting go of judgmentalism and hypocrisy and living in authenticity and respect and reverence for all peoples with a heart filled with mercy. And that way, that is the greater sacrifice. That is the will of God in this time, in this tradition, and for all time.